Anyways, welcome to the District of Sechelt. It's December the 24th, and we're in the Committee of the Whole. So we have an agenda before us. Like to, I guess, stop the agenda. Okay. Yep, we've got an agenda. Oh, there we go. So we've first and all in favor? There we go. We're ready to roll then. Okay, so is there any conflicts or situations of conflict? No? Okay, good. Okay, so today on the agenda we have one item, and it's the District of Chamber of Commerce from the District of Sechelt. Cool. Should we move to receive this presentation? Okay, all in favor? Okay. Gentlemen, it's good to see you here. Looking forward to your presentation. Normally we only take 10 minutes for a presentation, but seeing as how I'm the only one here today, we'll see how things go. So please take it away.
Very good. Thank you, Councillor Lamb. I'm here today with fellow director Gaetan Royer, who will join or will be on camera in a few minutes. I want to thank you for meeting with us today. You know, the members of the Chamber represent the views of the great majority of our community. We're not only business owners, but we represent our members. All our members have staff, families, friends, and of course customers. In many ways, businesses are the biggest contributor to this and biggest supporter of the community. The Chamber is proud of our preeminent role as the proactive voice for business on the coast. For example, we've organized over 50 events in the last 2 years, remotely and in person. These include our Sea Level Rise workshop, led by a national group of experts earlier this year, a water supply symposium in late 2019, many VIP visitors, including Your Worship, who spoke to us about a year ago, all candidates meetings for the federal and provincial elections, and most recently, the Building Community Summit, which we organized to bring builders, developers, investors, and consumers together to identify solutions to their current challenges. And I'd add, we've done all this on a budget of less than $40,000 per year, plus lots of volunteer time. We continue to stand up for our members and all businesses on the coast, and we are committed to identifying solutions rather than complaining. We also very much respect that each of you have stepped up to sit as elected officials and appreciate all that you've done. And today, we're here to ask even more of you and your management team. In the original agenda, we provided a copy of our advocacy inventory letter, which we sent in September. We were really, when we applied to speak to you, we were anticipating coming to talk about the details. But I think it's fair to say that events over the last couple of weeks have really brought 3 or 4 things to the fore. So today, we want to present our proposed solutions for attracting workers, for increasing the housing supply, value for money from our governments, and improving and expanding our infrastructure. Most importantly, we're here today to talk about solutions that can be implemented now. You're going to hear me use that word now a great deal today. All of these issues are urgent. Many would call them emergencies. Solutions that deliver real results now must be given priority. So before Gaetan and I get into details, I want you to know that our members are ready to work alongside you to implement these solutions. We believe the business community has an important role. We have the experience, the expertise, and we have the desire. So in short, I hope you will work with us so that we can together get it done. Chamber believes that changes in how things are being done by governments is a vital part of this, this change that we're proposing. We need to build for the future, which involves your management team being more flexible, more creative, and more receptive to less traditional and new approaches. Also, a big part of what we're talking about today is growth. It's like the raging waters last week. We cannot stop the fact that we are a popular destination for many, many people. Nor should we. We need more people to come to our community, to keep our community provided for and safe. Our aging population means more of our residents are retiring, and those jobs need to be filled by newcomers. So I see my internet has, there we go. Well, maybe this will work. So, you know, I was saying our aging population means that more people are retiring, and we need newcomers to take those jobs. As well, older people will need more services, including yours truly with his internet right now. We realize what we're presenting is likely to attract criticism from some quarters. While such seems to be inevitable in today's world, I call on those who are critical to provide workable, practical, and affordable solutions that will sustain our community's well-being. So let's move on to what our board of directors has unanimously agreed are solutions to the most pressing needs that we face. First one I want to talk about, this. There. So I realize I can skip through all of this now. All of you received this yesterday, so I apologize to the public that this is a bit quick. Talked about growth and the role that the private sector has to play. So I want to start with workforce attraction. There's no question when you talk to our members that we need hundreds and hundreds of new workers. Frontlines, people, service staff, hospital, trades, caregivers for elderly, truck drivers, and more. So how do we attract them? Well, we're a very attractive place, but a lot of people will still choose to stay home in other parts of Canada. And so one of our primary recommendations is that we must support and encourage immigration. We need to attract people to do the jobs that we're going short in the various areas that I've outlined. And that's not to ignore the entrepreneurs that want to come here, but in some ways we see that as something that will happen by virtue of being a very attractive destination with a very good lifestyle for people. But the immigration is vital. Unfortunately, the federal government and the immigration department are very, very slow. I could talk for a long time about this, but we are not getting the approvals for workers, for our members. We have one employer has about 30 full-time positions, and this person has less than 15 staff, many of them temporary foreign workers, and the person is not able to sustain their business. And I have great concerns for this person and their business. We have other members who are burning themselves out because of these shortages. And so it's not something we can wait on. It's something that I hope you'll work with us, because the Chamber will be making pitches, I suppose, pleas, demands perhaps even of our federal government to expedite immigration applications. Second one, we all know this, and Gaetan will have more to say in a minute about this, but we need an increase in housing now. We need the supply to increase. Cannot wait 2 or 3 years. That will help in 2 or 3 years, but we need housing now. We all have to be, and the words we've come up with are aggressively creative. Like an emergency situation when the roads wash out, we don't wait for approvals. We don't follow old routines and procedures. People jump into action and get the job done, get the road repaired. We rely on people that have the skills and expertise to help. We suggest we currently have a similar emergency here in Sechelt with the housing supply. So, as I say, Gaetan will have in a minute, more than a couple of things to say. But I think I want to just emphasize, we strongly believe that imposing restrictions on how homeowners use their properties will be counterproductive and ultimately ineffective. Restrictions on ownership for part-time residents, perhaps, limitations on short-term rentals will not provide the type or the quantity of housing that we need. New supply is the only effective way to do this. I mentioned earlier that we held a building community summit about 6 weeks ago, and we had several things that came out of that, recommendations from builders, developers, consumers, and investors. And so I'd like to now turn both the microphone and the camera over to my fellow director, Gaetan Royer. Gaetan is, as many of you know, an experienced developer, a builder, and a former local government city manager. So that's quite the combination. So Gaetan, I'll turn this over and turn that over.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for this opportunity, Mr. Chair, Your Worship, and councillors. The Chamber of Commerce is concerned about the housing crisis because business owners attract. Yep. Okay. Yep. Yeah. When talking to people in the community, I've been told that by business owners that they attract great candidates only to be told that they can't find housing, so they won't take the job. Private property owners want to build on their property, and they face a number of challenges. The Sunshine Coast Housing Report recognizes the role of the private sector, but Chamber members and the people who attended the business community, the community building summit that just took place, are feeling that the role is misunderstood. I attend the housing emergency meetings, and I felt strongly that the role was misunderstood, strongly enough that I asked to make a presentation. I've got 2 slides from that presentation here today. Policies and meetings don't build housing. Contractors build housing. The chart that's on screen right now shows a building continuum from emergency shelter all the way to ownership housing. Private sector is involved in every step of the way of all these various steps. One of my clients owns 30 A&W franchises. He gave their first job to many youth, hundreds of youth. He also mentors youth out of the fast food industry. So he's giving space in one of our buildings to Covenant House to provide emergency temporary housing for homeless youth along with mentorship. So we can rely on the private sector and benefactors to come up with solutions for that segment of the housing continuum. Trellis is a private company that's proposing to build housing for seniors. There's a number of projects that include affordable housing. TELUS is doing one project in this community, which is absolutely great. Throughout BC, private developers are building rental housing, and Sechelt approved a townhouse project that includes some secondary suites. And that kind of approach, one of the things that I'm going to share with you as part of the Building Community Summit report is that instead of approving secondary suites in townhouses and apartments for one project, it should be simply a text amendment of your zoning bylaw to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to include those in the future to facilitate that. We're working on two projects right now that include rent-to-own. These units are for young families with the income to pay a mortgage, but not enough savings. So rent-to-own is a solution that has been very successful in other communities. It should be encouraged by all municipalities, and actually the federal government is just releasing information about a program that they would like to include as part of the next budget. There's many people who work in the gig economy, self-employed. They just don't have the regular income to show to a bank that they qualify for a mortgage. A young couple might have 3 or 4 sources of income, and they need a rent-to-own program to prove to a bank that they can pay a mortgage by paying rent for 2 years. That rent, a large portion of it, becomes a down payment for the unit that they live in, and home ownership is really life-changing for young families. You can pay rent for 15 years and have a temporary layoff, you lose your housing, and you've got absolutely nothing to show for the hundreds of thousands of dollars that you've paid over those 15 years. With each mortgage payment, a young family builds equity, and I think in the long run, there should be policies to encourage that kind of approach. It's really important that developers provide some rent-to-own access to a home ownership. The next slide shows real strong evidence that there was a time when investors created great buildings in Sechelt. People invest in communities that welcome investment, that make it easy for developers to come up with buildings like this. And there has to be a recognition that thresholds have evolved over time. Nobody can build a wood frame building less than 6 stories today. Nobody can build concrete buildings less than 12 stories. These are concrete buildings that would not be feasible today. So density bonusing, the trading of affordable units for extra density, those kinds of things are going to be encouraging investors and developers to build housing that is needed in the community for years to come. If you do the exercise of calculating the tax dollars generated by a square foot of land that's vacant or underused in Sechelt compared to a square foot of land where there's 5 or 6 owners living above each square foot, you're going to see that there's a huge source of revenue that is not coming to help you do the things that you want to do because of the underutilization of the land. There's lots of taxpayers in this photographs and a very short stretch of road, a very short stretch of water lines and sewer lines, easy to maintain. It doesn't create new requirements for staff, but when you open up subdivisions, single-family subdivisions that offer very little rental possibility, that is a huge cost for the municipality. So this kind of development is really paying for itself in the long run for the community and provides a lot of community benefits, less traffic on the road because people can walk to services. So to get the private sector to build affordable housing, we need to make sure that there's balanced expectations between profit and benevolence. It's very reasonable these days to ask a developer to provide 10% of affordable housing within a project. Going above that, you can easily understand that 90% would make it absolutely impossible. But there has to be reasonable expectation. There has to be reasonable costs. Those costs need to be predictable. There's nothing that the private sector gets upset about and really in some cases turns away from land. There's nothing that upsets a developer more than changes at the last minute after you've invested hundreds of thousands of dollars in a design, and all of a sudden there's a requirement to reduce the size of land with a 5-meter land dedication for a road or additional requirements that are placed on the project. So the private development sector rewards are high, and that's because the risks are huge. And if you have to question yourself whether the holding costs are going to be 6 months or 10 years, that really kills the ability of the community to attract investors. So private builders can be your best partners to provide affordable housing. There's a number of ways by relaxing rules for laneway houses and subdivision of properties, the relaxing rules with regards to the secondary suite, the approval of secondary suites, the same way as the approval of patios used to be difficult, and because of the pandemic, many of those rules that we all thought were essential disappeared, they vanished, because we felt there was a need and we accommodated a process that was much more expedient. So expediency can be built into your approval systems. I thank you very much. John?
Thanks, Gaetan. Oops, try that again. Thanks, Gaetan. I want to just continue. We'll talk about value for money. And again, this is not about pointing fingers at anybody. It's recognizing that things are different, that times have changed, that we need to react to the issues that are in front of us. Having said that, we have polled our members, we've talked to many people, and candidly, our members don't see sufficient results to justify the recent increases in taxes. And they don't see the value in the proposed increases in taxes or in head counts. Just like many businesses and residents, we believe it is time for you to tighten your belts. We encourage you to look at ways to reduce the operating costs and do more with less. Perhaps you could challenge your management team to present a budget that contemplates a 5% reduction in operating budgets and identify what changes that would entail. Have the conversation, because it is not working to simply add on top of last year. And I'd add that some of our members with financial and management experience are quite ready to step forward and work with you and your staff on such an effort. We acknowledge this will be a challenge. Nobody likes cutbacks, but it's something our members are dealing with every day. It's reality. Some have been able to change their processes, maybe rely on technology. Some have had to learn to stock their own shelves and wait on their own tables. It's fair to say many are, in fact, most are working longer hours and earning less. So we respectfully suggest it is time for the district to do your part, find ways to deliver value without increasing taxes for operations. If our members can do it, so can you. Now, I want to move on to infrastructure, and we recognize, and we'll have more to say about it, this is not something that the district can address itself, but it is something that in your role as our elected officials, we want to work with you to support efforts that will bring real results now. The heat dome, sea level rise, water shortages, floods, traffic volumes, and more all highlight the need to up our game when it comes to the quality, safety, and redundancy of infrastructure. I think we'd all agree we were lucky last week. The damage that could have been done, the damage we see elsewhere in the province, it could have happened here. At our sea level rise workshop in May that some of you attended, were able to attend, I think you saw some of the planning that is going on elsewhere in the world, and it's time for us to really embrace that. We can't wait to address these environmental events or react to them like we're having to do elsewhere in the province. In our system of governments, of course, funding typically requires money coming from the province and the federal government and even other agencies occasionally. So we're ready to work with you to advocate for that, to push for it, and to perhaps come up with creative ways to finance some of these infrastructure requirements. I'll have more to say tomorrow about water supply when we speak to the SCRD, because that is, of course, in their mandate. For now, suffice to say, emergency times call for emergency measures and even interim solutions, shorter-term solutions. We need water, and to get it, we need all regulators to bend to accommodate what is the greater good for the community. We support the province providing funding and implementing effective strategies now for a lot of the social programs and the social challenges we face, whether it's in homelessness, mental health, childcare, and a myriad of other issues. But these are not things that you as local government need to be burdened with. My fellow director wrote a book on city and local governments and how it's endemic for other orders of government to try to download responsibilities to you. And we encourage you and will support you in pushing back to leave those responsibilities where they belong. Different topic or a different agenda. Without question, the Chamber believes we need a real highway. We don't need more studies. We've been studying this for 40 years. We were lucky last week. Again, imagine if we lost Chapman Creek. Imagine if Davis Bay had washed out or some of the other low-lying areas. We did come close to it, in, I believe, on Northwest Bay Road. Well, if that had been our so-called highway, we would be having a very different conversation today. Even during the pandemic, too, I can add the traffic volumes have continued to increase. And you may not be aware, but our traffic volumes are about the same as the Inland Island Highway south of Comox Valley. So, in our view, the province needs to award a contract for the detailed design and costing immediately. And you can work with us and others in the community to help make this happen. The other juggernaut we face is with BC Ferries. And having endured a 5.5-hour wait for a ferry a couple of weeks ago, as many of us have had to do, I think you'll agree we need a second ferry. But what a lot of people aren't recognizing is the Queen of Surrey is coming to the end of its life. So we, in fact, need to build 2 ferries. And we need better health care because the helicopter is just flying overhead right now to hopefully to bring somebody back here. But the ferries are an issue that require money. And even though BC Ferries is an independent corporation, they do need the province's support for arranging financing for these kind of projects. And they need our advocacy for our willingness to support this and to do our role in using the ferry and supporting the ferry company and the ferry workers. As a general comment, it seems too often the coast has been ignored, especially when it comes to infrastructure. And it's time for this to change. So you can count on the Chamber being ready to work with you. As far as the province is concerned, it's mostly around funding, as I say. Some of it involves getting them to stand aside and let experts get on with it, whether it's designing the highway or letting BC Ferries do their job. The other part of infrastructure funding that we rarely hear, there is such a huge appetite now for new types of funding, ESG funding, green financing, and such. If we can appeal to people's appetite for projects that are truly innovative and green, we can be at the front of the list of new infrastructure. I put down here again, I think this is partly for you and partly for the regional district, but I've been, we as the Chamber have been advised about opportunities to use reclaimed water from the Water Resource Center. We're 100% in support of that. We think it makes sense. We think the opportunity to avail ourselves of what I understand are very significant funding from other government agencies is just something that makes sense. And again, we'd be pleased to help with grant applications or letters of support or whatever, but that's something that needs to be done. I think tomorrow I'll be looking for the regional district to talk to us about the benefits that they see that would have, how that would help. So, you'll be pleased to hear, really our recommendation is please get into action. Don't study things again. My compliments have been many studies from staff and consultants. It's time to get on with things. We are in an emergency situation. We really ask that you let the industries that are the experts for these different projects get on and do them. Be creative and focus on new ways that will help build an even better community. Be courageous and know that we're ready to stand alongside you in moving forward. Thanks, and we'll be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you for your presentation. It was very thorough, as I expected. Covers a lot of ground, a lot of governments. So I guess one of the big things, you're looking for support from us, but first off, have we got questions? Any questions for the Chamber? Mayor Seegers.
Thank you. You talked about a building community summit that you held 6 weeks ago. And I talked to the two directors who are the liaisons. Can you tell us more about that? Because none of us know anything about that.
Yes. We organized this at the request of the building community. They were frankly concerned because they wanted to be frank, they wanted to be candid, and they didn't want to feel any limitations by having members of council or indeed staff from any of the governments involved. So that was a conscious decision. We are planning to roll out a more detailed analysis and explanation of the recommendations. But this was, and I think this goes to something that we have to frankly put on the table, that people are frustrated that they don't feel like they can get things done in Sechelt. And I take no pride in saying that, but I continue to challenge, speaking personally, I think Gaetan, you would concur, for a variety of reasons, people feel unwilling to come here to work in Sechelt. And we have to address that. And by we, I mean we, all of us. There are projects that are going on in other communities. I mean, the one that was mentioned in our board meeting, a special meeting earlier this week, was the number of projects going in where shovels are in the ground and projects are being completed. Not happening here, and we need to fix that. So the Building Community Summit, to answer your question directly, Your Worship, was to provide an opportunity for people to speak candidly and openly. There's no record will be published of who attended. We're here to represent those people and speak to what their feelings.
So I think some of that information will need to come forward. You're making allegations, right? Mm-hmm. That yep. You know the community, the construction industry is making. If we don't know about them, then we can't address them. So something like that will need to come forward so that we can see what kinds of processes or issues we have. I know as individuals, we get approached by developers. Yep. We had one of our councillors actually got a lot of that at the beginning of the term. And we addressed all of those issues and concerns because there's always two sides to a story. So we'd like an opportunity to look at what's happening there. One of the things that we have done is, our staff have, put together a development team. So whenever a developer comes to the district, our staff meet as a team, and they develop a point person for that project, and all decisions go through that team, so that there's, you know, like you talked about, late decisions. That doesn't happen. Does not happen.
It is happening, unfortunately. That's what I'm being told.
So then we need to know about that, because my understanding is from the developers who've expressed that, that's not actually the case.
Mm-hmm.
So,
okay. So
we need
then we'll
information to be able to address those
appropriate
kinds of things.
forum, because that's part of the complexity
Yes.
of this issue.
Okay.
Did you want to add something?
Yeah, I'd like to add something. I was surprised, at the, insistence by many of the people who, felt like they did not want to have any statement attached to their name. So in facilitating this session, I did two things. The first one, I said, I'm not going to include in the report anything that's not supported by everybody. And so there's specific issues that were simply not addressed in our recommendations because they were not supported by everybody. So it is a representation of the voice of everybody who participated. And the second thing is, yes, there are practical recommendations. We are not going to be presenting a report that criticizes. It's a report that's going to be providing actual solutions. And if I might share one recommendation, because you raised one example, our recommendation with regards to the development review group, the staff team that needs to review applications. Our recommendation is for that team to meet with the developer in person, to have a discussion, not to meet just staff and write a letter, and then the developer receives the letter and does not have an opportunity to actually discuss and find solutions. So that's one of the recommendations that is going to be in that report, to engage with the developer at the table between the staff team and the developer or the developer's representatives.
Okay, so
that's a practical solution that I think happens. Is something that we would like to present.
Yeah, that happens. So that's something that actually happens. Now, our staff meet with the developers. The developer comes in with their application and meets with our staff. So we'll need to look at some of the specifics to move that forward. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I see a hand up from Councillor Rowe.
Councillor Rowe.
Hi, can you guys hear me okay? Mr. Henderson, thank you for, and Mr. Royer, thank you for your presentation. I look forward to that report. Just a question, I think it was on the last slide, where the sentence said expert panel recommendations are a concern, I believe. Can you explain that a bit further? I'm not sure what you mean by that.
The provincial government had an expert panel, I believe is the way it was described, that reviewed a series of processes and procedures involving local government. And to a certain degree, they've come out saying local government's powers and authorities should be restricted, and I stand to be corrected, but essentially giving power to the province to do things, to impose things on local government. And that study was, I believe, released late last year, but it was really not picked up very much. It has been published, in September more recently. But it is something that we encourage you all to be aware of, because I don't think any of us are I'll speak on behalf of our membership, none of us want, in this case, Victoria, telling this community what's best for us. So, Councillor Rowe, the report is available online. I can even find the name for you in a second, but suffice to say, we wanted to highlight that that is something that is something for you to be aware of. The report is called Opening Doors BC Expert Panel Final Report.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. Thanks.
Yeah, pleasure. Thank you.
Any other questions from council?
You talked about rent-to-own projects, so maybe you can elaborate on what that, how municipal government facilitates that? Is that what you're looking for us to do? To go to a developer and say, we demand a rent-to-own project, or who bears the cost of carrying the cost for that?
Yeah. The municipality cannot demand that, the developers have the ability to apply for whatever it is that they are going to be wanting to see on their site, and then try to meet all the requirements, apply for rezoning or change to the official community plan. There are literally hundreds of rental projects being built right now in the Lower Mainland. And those are projects that there's a recognition that the generation behind our generation, well, maybe I'm too quick to say our, but because there's some younger folks, but the access to home ownership is not available for many people who need to rent. I've got 2 children. I don't know if you have any children at this table who are adult children who rent accommodation, but there's 2 social factors at play. One is the fact that people have difficulty accessing ownership, and socially, rental is becoming much more acceptable because we have family members who are renters, and my kids are good kids. They just don't have the means to buy a home right now. So there used to be a stigma attached to rental that, there were even buildings built with 2 separate doors, 1 door and 1 elevator for the tenants and 1 for the owners of the upper floors. That's gone. Now there's mixed rental and strata buildings that are being built in a lot of locations. And if it's not happening here, I think we need to ask ourselves what it is that prevents that. There's a role to play by a municipality to encourage economic development, including investment in properties. There's nothing wrong with creating an inventory of the things that are required and encouraging, finding incentives, rolling out the red carpet for people who are going to be building a rental building. Telling a developer that a portion of the fees is going to be lower if it's a rental building as opposed to a strata building. So all those measures and the approval of secondary suites in townhouses, it's not a given in your zoning bylaw. Secondary suites are not an accepted use. If you were to include secondary suites to be an accepted use in all townhouse projects, you would see more of them. You allowed lock-off suites to be permitted as part of an apartment building, so that those are extra doors in the hallway, so more people living in the building. But that allows an aging parent to cohabit with somebody who owns a unit in an apartment building, and that creates opportunity for more access to ownership. It creates an opportunity for mortgage helpers, and it creates rental housing in the community. So there's all kinds of tools that exist.
I would say that this council's been very much accepting of ideas like that, like the development going forward with, the suites with the townhouses, that developer's making a program for, assistance in the down payments. Yeah, it's, you know, of course, there are members of the community that are wholly opposed to that, but I think as a council, we see the benefits of increasing that supply. The developers that are working in the community right now within Seashell to create rental-only projects. I mean, there's two that have come before us, and there's a couple that actually are almost at the permission to proceed stage. So, you know, knowing some of those developers, you know, I think provided that they have the right engineering and architectural team to put forward the right product to planning, and you will see projects move forward in a timely fashion without much delay. So you know, as Mayor Seeger has alluded to, I think in some cases, previous challenges have been maybe more on the types of packages that are submitted, so that we are unable to really move forward based on not a complete package for what we need to move forward. So, like she says, there's two sides to every story, but a number of the developers that are submitting proper packages are getting their projects pushed through in a timely fashion. And we're seeing more and more rental because of that on the books. Great.
I think, if I may, Councillor Scott, the distinction we're making is we hear that there are applications in for approval. We hear the process is going okay or awkwardly, or maybe I just haven't heard ones that are going well. But any of them involve future construction. And what we talked about earlier about workforce attraction, we need people now. You know, the hospital I know was very close to not being able to serve food a few days ago because the food service staff, several people were off sick. We need to get workers in, and not in 2 or 3 years. So the distinction I want to make sure we focus on is what can we do to get housing by January, in addition to improving the processes that I hear are being improved.
Okay, that's fair, but housing is a capacity issue, and so on one hand, the chamber wants to support small business and short-term rental and such like that, but on the other hand, we don't really have an avenue to push down that road to instantly put product on the market for rent.
Well, to a certain degree, what Gaetan has been talking about would help. If there was approvals for secondary suites, like expedited approval. If somebody came in and said, I've got a room above my garage, it's not quite what traditionally is required. Maybe it's 1,100 square feet, you know, big, but too big to be qualified as a secondary suite. Some of these are things that can be done at an administrative level, and so to at least open up some opportunities and to incentivize people, perhaps elderly people that have older or have homes but don't want to move out, don't want to spend the time and effort to go through an approval, a complex approval process, to find some way that we can make it possible to encourage them to make that housing available now.
I would argue that enough of this coast is opportunistic right now, just looking at the Sunshine Coast rental, that people are renting out just about anything and everything, whether it's approved or not. It's just happening naturally.
And it's still not enough.
I know.
Yeah,
I know,
that's,
but it's,
you know, so I'm not, I don't want to sound like we're disagreeing with you. We're just encouraging that there be flexibility. If somebody comes with a clever idea, whether it involves setbacks or innovation or allowing something new, hey, make it clear. We're giving you a variance on this one issue, but don't treat it as a precedent for everybody else, because we're going to use you as the proof that it either works or it doesn't work. but let's try some of these things.
Councillor McLean or Councillor Toth, any questions? Excellent. Councillor McLean.
Thank you for your presentation and the ideas. I think it's really valuable to bring this type of stuff forward. One thing I did take note, in that you did bring up several innovative solutions. Councillor Scott mentioned the rent-to-own program. And I'm wondering if, in the Community Building Summit, there was a role where the Chamber is encouraging the building community to provide those innovative solutions. Do you see that as a role that the Chamber does, is working with the development community and potential investors in our community to come up with some of those solutions?
Yeah, we certainly did, and the report is under review. It's not ready to be released, but it is almost in action in terms of the recommendations being discussed and various people taking some of these things into consideration. But it's pretty obvious that rent to own of a new unit to be built at some time in the future is not part of what John is talking about, which is a more immediate solution. But I think in the long term it will certainly help. And we have to realize that the ownership of a large single family property, it's still going to be in demand, but this is not going to help the generation that's coming up with the challenge of trying to get access to a market where the entry level is in the $750,000 for new product. So we have to implement different models of living. There's things in zoning bylaws that and the official community plan with regards to units per hectare, for example, that are completely disconnected from the size of current townhouse projects. So the townhouse project that was just approved for Mills Road is the kind of project that we need to, that project and then smaller townhomes even need to be considered. So that's long term. In the immediate term, I think having a look at available land that the municipality has is perhaps one of the ways to address some of the short-term demand, making that land available and inviting people to think of solutions and making that land available.
Okay. Okay. Just following up on that same kind of thinking, I think one thing that I see the Chamber having great potential in is the network that you do have. You mentioned it off the top. It's not just the businesses; it's all the employees, and it's a large aspect of the community. I agree with you there. So, how can we work together to? I can't come up with a better term than change hearts and minds regarding density and development. I hear you. I hear that density is a good thing. Single-family homes put more strain on our municipality. So do you have any ideas on how we can really change public opinion on that? Because I'm looking at the townhouse development. It's coming to public hearing tonight, and I'm expecting a large amount of opposition to that from neighbors who would rather see it single-family home than townhouses. So how can we work together to kind of change that mentality across the community?
Okay, and before, Gaetan, when it first came to us, there were more units on that property, many more units on the property, and the community pushed back. So we're hoping this is a compromise. We'll see what happens tonight. Right?
Well, we're certainly all hoping that coverage of this is going to inject some ideas in the community. I think there has to be a recognition that growth is all of us You know, it's all of us having more of us with our extended families. There's a photograph I used in the presentation I made on Monday to the emergency housing subcommittee, which includes a slide with 5 generations. You know, this community, as many other communities, is struggling with the issue of people aging out of their single-family home and having to leave the community to go to a seniors complex in Langley or elsewhere. There's young families who are those workers we're trying to attract back to this community. Some of them are young folks who went to university in the Lower Mainland, and they can't buy their way back here, and now they live in rental accommodation elsewhere in the community. Growth is all of us, and the people that we're trying to attract are going to be contributing to this community.
I'd like to add to that. I think often these things are issues that we can all agree to disagree until we try it. So many examples. I was around at the end of the building in Gibson's of the then bypass, and horror of horrors that we're going to bypass Lower Gibson's. Somebody had the courage to build that. Somebody had the courage to approve London Drugs, and closer to home, somebody had the courage to approve Canadian Tire, a big box store. There was a resistance to all of those things, but until we do some, all we'll do is continue to hear from one side or the other, and I think that ultimately that's your burden, it's your responsibility to make a decision that is in the greater good of the community. So, you know, to try to, personally, I have to be clear, I haven't consulted with our board on this, but personally, I think it is incumbent on you to take your own values and take your own beliefs and make a decision after you listen to everybody. Trying to find that accommodation for everybody, I personally don't think that works.
Thank you.
Mayor Sigers?
Thank you. You mentioned that the volumes on the Island Highway below Comox compared to the Sunshine Coast Highway. Can you share that data with us?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. About 11,000 vehicles a day on average, and they're, I believe, 11,500. There's been a private sector initiative, completely independent of government, to assess the needs for the highway, and it's born out of frustration because of all these different studies involving building orphan bike lanes, where you start a bike lane and you end it and you go back onto the highway, and that we can't solve our burdens, and we can't build the redundancy and the resilience that we require because of any number of reasons: growth, global warming, natural disasters, and so on. So the report is proprietary, but I can share that statistic. Those statistics.
So you don't have a report that can be shared with
the whole report
other level
is,
governments
no,
or something?
No, the whole report is not, but
Okay.
I have a copy, so we can talk about it, parts of it.
Okay.
But these are, by the way, this data is taken from the Ministry of Transportation. I'm not sure if you're aware, but there are permanent traffic measurements on highway, this 101.
So that information can be gathered.
Yeah, no, and I'm happy to provide that.
Okay, and then I think you very clearly outlined the challenge we have at this table when you talked about, you know, we need to focus on infrastructure, we need to look at sea level rise, we need to deal with climate change. I think that's become very clear to all of us in the last while. But on the other side, we're supposed to do a decrease in what the taxes are. So I think that's the thing we struggle with here at this table, is how do we do both? Because some of those, like climate change, I mean, I attended the session that the Chamber put on. If our whole downtown is underwater, that means we have a huge cost to deal with some of that and move those things forward. We can't do that if we keep cutting taxes. We can't repair our infrastructure if we don't have the capital to do that. We've been very successful over the last year, a year and a half actually, in getting grants for infrastructure because, you know, the federal government, provincial government were giving out funds. We had projects that were ready to go. We applied for them. We've gotten a number of them here in Sechelt and 100% funding, which is a benefit to our residents, right? There's a huge need. I mean, we all know that, and we're not alone. Every community has the same issue, in Canada and US, right? Same issue. So
to be
how do we do
clear,
that?
you know, to be clear, the comments that I made on behalf of the chamber relate to the operating budget. I agree with you. The need for capital funding, finding creative ways both to get grants, and yes, full marks for the grants that you've been able to get. But it's the operating side that we are challenging your management team to do better.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah.
Any further questions from council? Okay, you know, your presentation today is, like, I'm gonna thank you for your presentation. There's no simple answer, and we can work our buns off to move ahead and do things, and anyways, we're just in such unprecedented times for the housing thing, you know, for people to own a home, to, you know, to even to rent a home, so it's always good to be reminded of where we are. So once again, I'll thank you for your presentation, and if you do need, you know, number one, too, I'm hoping that you're working with the other chambers, just support in numbers, and I believe that the District of Sechelt, this council would be here to support any positive, you know, things that you want to put forward. Mm-hmm. And we're always, I believe this council is very open to positive input. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And I'd just close, we do recognize that you have all been open, and of course I have some greater clarity perhaps than others about how much work it is and the responsibility. So we are grateful. We are here to recognize it is unprecedented times, and the old saying, call for unprecedented measures. So we're trying to give you some ideas of things that maybe can be done different. So thank you.
Okay, we'll move on. Is there any new business or business items, anything? No, I guess we'll call for adjournment. All in favor? Okay. Any questions from the gallery?